Hey, that got everybody's attention, didn't it? Seriously, years ago, a Supreme Court justice said about pornography, you know, it's really hard to define, but I know it when I see it.
And corporate culture can be kind of the same way. It can be difficult to define, but you do know it when you see it. When you walk down the halls, certainly when you work in a company, it's got a great corporate culture. You recognize it.
But back years ago, when I was back in grad school, I had a professor who had a really simple definition for what corporate culture is. And he said it is how we get things done.
So it's the sum total of all the policies and procedures, but it's more than that. It's how employees treat customers, it's how employees treat each other, and how management relates to the employees.
Right, and how do you get corporate culture? You know, really, how does this happen? Well, there's a couple of things we know. One is that it starts from the top.
And the second thing we know is that it starts from the beginning. When the companies are really small, things that happen there move forward.
Absolutely. And those things that happen early in a company then get passed down over and over and over again, and they get passed down normally in story format.
In stories. Take, for example, McKinsey & Company. Now, McKinsey is one of the big strategy consulting firms, one of the biggest in the world now. But back in 1930, it was just getting started. And a gentleman named Marvin Bower was leading the firm. And one of the things that was critically important from Marvin's perspective was that the firm always put the client's interest ahead of their own interest.
And Marvin told this story about when the firm was really just getting started, that it was kind of struggling along, and this huge piece of business came to them, and he turned it down.
He turned it down because he was pretty certain that the prospective client was not going to implement the firm's recommendations. And he said, you know, if a client won't implement our recommendations, they'll get no value, they've wasted their money. And even though we really need this engagement, we're going to turn it down because that's what's in the client's best interest.
And 60 years later, they were still telling that story over and over again. It really illustrated how the company felt about their client engagements.
Another example of a company with a strong culture is IBM. Now, Thomas Watson was the founder of IBM, and Thomas Watson had a sort of peculiar way of looking at things. He thought that mistakes and errors should be embraced.
Yeah, actually he did. He said, if you want to truly succeed, double your error rate. That's the first thing you do.
Which sounds a little counterintuitive, but if you think about it, it makes sense. And the illustration of this is he had a gentleman working for him in the 1940s, and the gentleman made a mistake. And it cost the company $1 million.
Now, $1 million, as you can imagine, today is a bunch of money. But back in the 1940s, $1 million was huge.
And so the gentleman knew that he was going to get fired, and rather than wait for the axe to fall, he penned his resignation letter and went and handed it to Mr. Watson.
Right, but instead, Mr. Watson said, fire you? I'm not going to fire you. I just spent $1 million on your education. Why would I ever fire you? And this just goes to illustrate their true company culture, embracing those mistakes and errors.
And so these stories get passed down. And you know, there are stories about, you know, Capital One. I know some of you here work at Capital One. But back in the beginning, when Rich Fairbank and Nigel Morris were spinning Capital One out of Signet Bank, one of the things that was critically important to Rich and Nigel was analytics. Good, strong analytics were really, really important.
They loved the math geeks over at Capital One. And an illustration of how strongly they felt about this is that back in the early days, they would actually come, Rich and Nigel would come and spend time with the business analysts, sit in on their meetings and comment. And that may sound like a little thing until you realize that business analyst is really one of the junior positions at the firm.
And Rich and Nigel weren't just there, you know, rah-rah showing support. They were digging in because it was so important to them that these analytics be done correctly. And those stories get passed on and they get passed down. But it's not just big companies. There's a local company called Premier Pet Products. Try to say that quickly 3 times after a couple of years.
He messes it up all the time. But Premier, when we did a little work with them a few years ago, actually we got told a story early on that for us illustrated how the company felt about their employees. They really treated them like family.
Sadly, one of the employees had lost a son. He'd been killed in a tragic accident. And unfortunately, she didn't really have the money to put on a proper funeral.
Right, and so senior management actually paid for the expenses. Now, they did it anonymously, but it kind of leaked out over the years. But that is one of the stories that they tell over and over again, just to show how management really feels about their employees. There are lots of great companies, lots of great small businesses and larger businesses in Richmond. You know, if you think about not just the Capital Ones, but there's CarMax and Pediatric Connections.
And Snag a Job and Dominion Payroll, and you can probably name 100 others. But almost every successful company has a very strong and positive culture. It's that critical.
Yes, and that's what Mark Fernandes is here to speak about today, about how important culture is for your organization and how it develops and can be sustained even as you grow your business. Now, just a little bit about Mark. First of all, he went to NC State, graduated from NC State.
Which, of course, is not a Virginia school.
But I think it's still okay, you know, that's still good. He joined the Luck Companies back in 1989, and over the years grew his career to actually being the president of 2 of their business units.
He did. He ran 2 of the business units, and now he's the Chief Leadership Officer. And I'm going to have to read this part. As the Chief Leadership Officer, Mark provides strategic direction for the enterprise mission and brand, and provides strategic direction for the enterprise mission and brand, and builds and implements a values-based leadership model.
There you go. All right, so join us in welcoming Mark Fernandes.
Thanks. Hey, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Come on, it's late. Help me out. So before I start kind of gabbing up here, I'm kind of interested who's in the room a little bit, and you won't have to hear from everybody, but got we'll say a few more mature, a few youngsters. Is that a fair way to say it? So small business, big business. This little gang, who y'all? What are y'all in here?
We're a group of students from Virginia Commonwealth University. We started an entrepreneurship club.
Nice.
Yes.
And what's the mission of the entrepreneurship club?
To build companies that stay in Richmond and give back to the community.
Really? How about that? Pretty good. When did you start the club?
It started last year, but we really got underway this semester.
Okay. And what would you all hope to get out of a session like this? There's a whole lot better things you could probably be doing right now. But
We really want to see where to start our organization, where to really build a basis of support and find mentorship,
okay.
as well as allowing us to expand and connect with different people in the community that can really provide a networking sort of base for us,
okay.
for our different companies that are launching forward.
Fantastic. And if y'all aren't paying attention, so this is classic Gen Y, right? They're coming like crazy. Things to keep in mind is by 2020, they're about 45% of our workforce, and by 2025, they're 75% of our workforce. So we got 2 options, right? We can say, oh, they all want a trophy and they're lazy and, you know, all those different things, or you can say they're fantastic, because I happen to think they are. Because everywhere I go, I wasn't doing that in college, I can tell you that, but everywhere I go, find a lot of wonderful, you know, youngsters in college already doing the CSR stuff, already, you know, thinking about what they want to do with their careers, and they're coming. So I'd say embrace it. What else? So who else is in the room? Anybody? Yes, sir.
Al Richardson, small business owner, broker, and investor in the Richmond area.
Okay.
I'm in the business of helping people rehab small houses in the north side area.
Nice.
I like to empower minorities,
Okay.
give opportunity to those that might be in need of basic skills and jobs and job training.
Okay.
And that's it.
Okay. How many small business owners? Let's just, whoa. All right. What about you 2 thugs? You guys are,
Mid-sized business.
Okay.
You've got leadership and second tier, I guess.
Okay.
We're with Draper Ayton with civil engineers and surveyors.
okay. Good to see you again. All right, so my name is Mark Fernandes. I work with Luck Companies. New name is the holding company now for Luck. Stone is now the aggregates division. We have 3 other businesses. Been there since '89, 20-something years, 23 years. Started out in sales. I was really, really lousy at that, so they moved me into management. That's how it works, guys. Company was much smaller at the time, and by the grace of God became an officer at 30 years old and just 100% on the clueless bus. Company president about mid-90s, and then about 3.5 years ago, this glorious job of a chief leadership officer. Has anybody ever heard of one of those? So here's a clue, right? If you put a C-level role in that is called a chief leadership officer, what do you think your company's passionate about? People, leadership, development, right? And for you guys, you know, you've read over and over and over and over, you know, people are our number one asset. People are the people. But what's fascinating is when you look inside the company and you'll have capital budgets to fix equipment and expenses from our end, and you know, tasks and task list, to-do list, and you ask people where your people list is, and they don't have one, right? So all we've done is, you know, recognize we're 90 years next year, okay? And Charlie, who's my partner, his granddad started the company under the guise of do right by your people, they'll do right by you. And he starts the company in 23. 5 years later, we go into the Depression, okay? And the first thing he worries about is his people. And so he made a commitment to them, you will always get paid, period. And so there are a lot of times he didn't pay himself and he paid his folks. Then he realized they weren't eating well, so he bought a railroad car. We had one quarry. And he put the railroad car at the quarry, and he'd feed them a breakfast every morning so that they could have a good meal to start the day. All right. Always had gifts in his trunk, so anytime their families, birthdays, holidays, whatever, he made sure everybody has gifts. Charles, his son, my boss's dad, takes over in the mid-50s, works with David Martin, and comes up with the term, we care. Starts sounding familiar, right? And Charles has won every award you could ever win in our industry. And every time he wins the award, he talks about one thing. And what do you think he talks about? It's people. Over and over. And I've been in officer meetings with him for 20 years. And he goes, I know you've heard me say this before. Yes, sir. And he repeats it. So Charlie, my partner, takes over in 95. Company was about 300 people, maybe 350. I was the VP, vice president, and by about 2002, we had just about ruined the company. We were fast. Now, we were growing, okay, so we were small, right, and we went from small to mid-size in about 4 years. So we went from about 300 associates to 1,350 in about 4 years, and that's a game changer, okay. Sean at Snag a Job, about 350. You know, he started feeling getting a little wobbly. I don't know if that's a magic number or not. But I remember when I ran a location. I remember in that location, 20, 25 people, I could muscle that whole thing, right? And then at some point, that game changes. So it's all scalable when you really got to pay attention. And so we were making a pile of money in 2003, but we were a complete train wreck as an organization, right? The nastiest place to be was in an officer meeting. We couldn't stand each other. And I'm not kidding, I was one, right? I was one. And it's adult daycare, guys. It ain't no different, right? Just big kids, that's all we are. And so, long story short, we call Caterpillar, partners of ours up in Peoria. They recommend this company in Texas, Whole Cat, who 15 years prior had gone through their values journey. They got to bring in, because they're a big company, Peter Holt owns the San Antonio Spurs, they got to bring in Ken Blanchard, O'Connor, and Kouzes, I think, is the three. So they got to bring in the Hammers. So we called them, they send now a friend of mine out, couldn't stand him at the time. Guy Klumpner, this dude shows up, we don't know him, remember we're all in bad mood anyway. Walks in the room, big hat, no cattle, Texas guy. And introduces himself, tells us all to get out a piece of paper. Right? And he says, now write down everything you want to change about the company. Oh, I was tearing it up. I was tearing it because I'm a recovering jerk, still recovering. So I'm murdering, right? I'm, CFO can't add, Mr. Luck needs to leave, too old kind of stuff. And he says, stop. About 7 minutes in. Okay? And the next question he asked, right, is the one that why we're here today and hang around with people like Harvard and Hay and all these folks. He said, on your paper, how many of you wrote down you? Me. Like, I'm the problem. And how many of us you think wrote that down? How about none? Right? And that was how it started. Be the change you want to see in the world, in your organization, in your startup, whatever it might be. That's how we started in '03. Here we are 10-ish years later in our second phase of this work. Okay, and we're kind of lucky. I'll tell you why we're lucky in a minute. But this conversation, first off, the organization is one person, 500, 5,000, 50,000. We talked to PricewaterhouseCoopers, 200,000, right? This work is free for the most part, if you so choose. Okay, and it's simply about how you treat people, right? And does that really matter? And we'll see. Okay. So let's see. Is anybody seeing or sensing this sort of noise that's growing over culture and leadership and people? Are you sensing a little bit of noise about that? Right? I mean, it's amazing. I don't have my glasses on. I'll give you some statistics, but every day you can wake up and this morning, right? Frequently timely recognition linked to your core values reduces turnover, increases productivity in delivering your company goals and objectives, and increases employee engagement. This stuff is flying out right now, okay? And we're going to talk about why, right? And does it really matter? And what's the solution? So you go back to the 60s, right? Great man theory is in play. So basically, leaders, it was all about if you're 6'2", wore a great suit, had a full head of hair, right? You could be a good leader.
I got one.
You can always tell your friends, they're like, oh, I guess you're out, Fernandes. Right? And that they called it the great man theory. And it was about charisma, and it was literally about what you looked like on the outside. It was command and control, my way or the highway. And it worked extraordinarily well for the times. We were still a little bit more industrialized. We were still coming off, turn this crank 100 times a day, and that was in play in the 60s. Well, at that time, culture, leadership, trust, right, organizational development, 100 to 200 articles per year. 1960s, that wasn't that long ago, right? 1970s, and I think it was coming on the heels of a lot of the research in the 40s by guys like Maslow and Bowen, okay? 1970s, we go to transformational leadership. Now it's, as a country, we're evolving, and now it's about inspiration and empowerment, and those things started to come in vogue in the 70s, transformational leadership, right? But it was still kind of what I did to you, but it was darn sure different than command and control. 1990s. Oh, and about 1,000. That number goes from 1 to 200 a year to 1,000. Right? 70s. 1990s, 10,000 articles now. Right? In the 1990s are being written about leadership, trust, organization, culture. Today, right? Today, 40 to 50,000 white papers, articles, books per year are being written on the subject. Why? Why do you think we've gone from 1 to 200 a year to 40 to 50,000 per year, right, in 40 short years.
It works.
It works, okay? Right, they're seeing some results. Why else? Y'all didn't think I was going to stand up here and yak in that microphone all day, I hope. Why else? Why so many?
All the great men are dead.
All the great men are dead?
Wow.
Because it doesn't come natural.
It doesn't come natural? Can we write that one down, by the way? All the great men are dead. It doesn't come natural. That's interesting.
It's still an issue.
It's still an issue. Let's talk about that. What's your name, partner?
Tom,
Tom. Why? What makes you think it's still an issue? Because, by the way, Tom's really close here.
well, I think a couple things. We're in an informational age where people can exchange ideas and information easier. You work for an industrial company. You pounded out stones and rocks and shipped them off where they need to be.
Yeah.
But we're exchanging information at such a rapid pace right now that we can do 40 or 50,000 articles on leadership. Whereas before, it was the great men who were just penning it out.
Period.
Right. And then getting that to somebody took time and effort.
Yes, sir.
But just to build on Tom's point there, to me, the way in which people relate is fundamentally different because people are looking for ways in which to network and to cluster around certain opportunities and shift from one project to the next very quickly. Don't expect job security for life. And things are rapidly evolving. So the old hierarchical systems of leadership really don't apply now. They've become more or less obsolete.
Yeah, and I was going to go close with this, but as we go through, we don't have a whole lot of time to talk about 2,000 years, but as we go through this, what I want you to think about is a dominance era, consciousness era. Okay, that's what's going on, is this fundamental shift, right? And how they relate and how we have to relate. But this idea that something's not right is really true. And here's the facts. Do any of y'all read much about associate engagement? Engagement.
I did in industrial psychology.
Okay, industrial psychology. Simple term, right? That basically it's highly engaged associates are giving you that extra 1 to 2%. Right? If there's two groups, the Hay Group, Boston, New York, and Gallup do mountains of research on this stuff. We're doing a white paper with the Hay Group right now. It's engagement. Okay? So they have ways to measure it. We do this test every year that measures the engagement of our associates. All the statistics are telling us this, right? Whether you look at Gallup, Hay, you can read about it in Harvard, wherever you want to go. Let me ask y'all. So if you were to think about all the associates around the world, well, we'll just do a domestic, right? Numbers are still the same. If you were to think about your company, and you were to think about highly engaged associates, right, giving you that extra mile, what do you think the percentage is, national average, of highly engaged associates in companies? What's your guess?
20%.
20%?
30.
Less 30?
10%.
10? Listen to y'all. There's your clue. Right? Because you're right. It's like 22 to 26%. Right? So why the? I mean, what? So really, so why do we react that way? Most of y'all own your businesses, right? Why do we react that way?
Not normally a company priority.
Not a company priority.
I don't think they care.
They don't think they care. What else?
Grown to accept it.
We've grown to accept it. Mushroom management, right?
Yeah, well, most of us worked for those big companies that said they cared, but they really didn't, so we don't really believe it anymore. That's why we left and started our own companies.
Okay. Oh, that's good news, right? But it's true. It's true, right? So some others, then they just talk about people that are, effective. They actually do the job they're being asked to do. 44%. 44%. So more than half of our, we got 1,000 people. Our numbers are different than this, but I love talking again. Caterpillar, 140,000. I'm going, gang, are you thinking about the fact that you got about 70,000 people out there that aren't even giving you their paychecks worth on an average, right? They'll say 50-something% of people are just collecting a paycheck. Y'all, that's not good. Right? That's not good, because when you read about what engagement is and what enablement is, it's really, really important. I like to think of it as, man, the associates dig what they're doing and they dig the company. Think about it that way. Right? Think about, has anybody, if your boss isn't here, do not raise your hand. Has anybody worked for a lousy boss or a lousy company? So tell me, now use a word. What was it like?
Tiring.
Boring?
Tiring.
Unorganized?
Frustrating.
Dysfunctional? Frustrating? Dysfunctional? Agonizing? What was that? Hypocritical. Now, for all you owners, can't you not wait for them to answer the phone when your customer calls? Right? I mean, that's, y'all, we're just this side of Fred Flintstone. We're not a bunch of Harvard MBAs running around out there in Goochland. I was a stonemason and a bouncer when I got a job. I was bigger, so don't make fun of me. All right? You're right. Okay? But listen to that and think about how many associates are out there on tilt, we call it. And those are the ones greeting your clients, and those are the ones, and you want some productivity, you want more sales, I said it's free, it really is. Get those people to go, man, I love it here. My boss is awesome. What a concept, right? I love it here and my boss is awesome. So, if we know there's all this interest, and y'all, that's why, because they're realizing, we can keep squeezing the blood out of a turnip, or they're going, my God, look at all this opportunity. All these people walking around on tilt, right? And you got all those statistics, and then they go, well, what's the answer? What do you think the answer is?
Good leadership.
Thank you. Good leadership.
I think part of one of the part B's to G's, or how many different parts you can add to that, though, is putting the right people in the right place.
We're going to talk about that too.
And I think that's a fundamental component of good leadership.
Amen. Tom, right?
Yes.
Do you want to finish? You got this thing.
Just tell me where you're going and I'll...
Tom, we're going to go there. But that's still the leader.
Right.
Right? Still the leader. I love it when I go help companies and they tell me how screwed up their company is. I'm like, really? Here's a mirror. Right? Here's a mirror. Don't tell me how screwed up your company is. You're running it. Hello? Primal leadership. These guys, great bodies of work. I think, different schools do different things. I just tend to like the stuff that comes out of Harvard and Goldman and Boyatzis and that whole gang up there, right? Bill George, got to spend some time with him. Well, that bunch wrote a book 10, 12 years ago called Primal Leadership, where they did a bunch of research on human beings, because that's all this is, right? And they said, in the book, that they realized that as much as 30% of the success of an organization, 30%, right, is directly related to how the people in the company feel about the company. This isn't going to get any smarter than this, by the way. But does that make sense?
Well, of course it does, because you
right? Good. Look at her. She's like, yeah. Right?
And they spent how much doing that research?
But
It should be.
I agree. But how many people you think are really fretting about it? Really fretting about it? About that many? Look at the numbers. It is common sense, and yet 75% of the associates out there are not highly engaged. It is this whole, it doesn't get any better now. This whole thing is common sense. So if as much as 30% is derived by how the associates feel about the organization, how much of how those people feel does the leader control, do you think? What percent?
Oh, like 80%.
Yeah. 50 to 75%. Whoa. I love doing this with college kids. They're, I want to lead someday. I'm like, are you sure about that? right? Or just make sure you know what you're signing up for, because it is. It's as high as 75%. Blanchard will tell you the same thing. It's the associate's relationship with their boss and with the company.
And is it because the bosses forget where they came from, or were they just innately messed up? Now I'm going to use the expletive.
I can tell you, I've been working on this 12 years. What's your name?
Christy.
Christy. I'm not kidding. This is all I do. In the last 4 years, neuroscientists, literally Harvard, hey, right? I absolutely know the right thing to do. And I guarantee you, before dinner time tonight, I'll screw it up. It's hard. Okay, that's why a lot of companies don't do this. It is hard. Yes, ma'am.
But a lot of the disengagement, I think, doesn't that sort of tie into that struggle of me versus we, and this idea that it's all about what I get out of it as an individual. My dad's day, where he worked 50 years for a company or something,
Yep.
It was about the we.
Yep.
We're all in it together. We've got a team spirit kind of stuff. You do the right thing by the company, and the company takes care of you.
That's right.
Now, and I don't mean to, Crystal's in the room, so I got to be careful what I say about entrepreneurism. But now it's the value is in everybody being the boss and everybody being independent. So it's very difficult as an owner or manager to create that sense of camaraderie, teamwork, common goal when everyone's asking themselves, well, what's in it for me? I know what's in it for you. You own the company. But what's in it for me?
Yeah. And you know what? That's what we got to do. And I hear you, and you're not wrong. And I'll tell you about another statistic here in a minute. But that is, I have to figure out, remember, I want to lead. I have to figure out how to make meaning for all those creatures, 1,000 of them in our company. I have to do that. Whether it's what's in it for me or I'm worried about my family, I got to know that. Leadership is about meeting people where they are. And so that's why I love Gen Y. So they all won trophies. Great, show me. I'd love to see them. I don't care. I have to deal with that as a generation if I'm going to make this right. But I can promise you this, you start meeting them where they are, and then you start bringing them back a little bit, they'll come back. They really will, because they're people. It's a fascinating thing. Money, right? Another thing. It's fascinating, right? They will say that money, by the way, is a motivator. It's not an inspirer. But my version of company cultures is I believe the culture, I look at it like a brand, right? I think it's kind of the collective attitudes and behaviors of the associates. So if you put them all in a blender and stir it up, there's your culture, right? And what they'll say is that money, and if you think about variability, leaders, you're constantly watching your organization, trying to get a litmus, we do, I should say, try to get a litmus test on how they're doing. You can move it 2% with money. 2. Okay? 2% this way, 2% that way. You can move it, again, research shows, 28% with leadership. 14 times the amount you can move that thing with leadership versus money. Okay? The last piece was what Harvard said. They said they took all these great companies and they said, what's similar? And they found out what they do, whatever that associate DNA is, they said, make meaning for them beyond just making money. And that's what you got to do.
Job stretch.
Sir?
Job stretch.
Oh, it's big. Yeah, big. But, again, whether you have 1, 5, 15, 500, 5,000, are you getting up every day, putting your feet on the floor, and worrying like crazy about your associates? Listen to the numbers. Right? Listen to these numbers, man. And are you, or, right, the minute the equipment breaks, the minute the customer gets upset, is it like, oh, and then you start screaming at everybody and you can't figure out why, right? Because we're it's all about trust. It's one of the big ones. And man, is that fragile. Okay? And it's not the big things that get you, it's the little ones. Right? It is so fragile. The trust, that relationship with your associates is sentence by sentence. Trust. And it's a fragile thing. You want to drive engagement up, drive trust up. But we got wobbly when we had to do our first reduction in force. We had never done one before. We were worried to death about it because we knew it was going to affect the trust of our associates. So before we jump into and run through a little bit, so what's our response to that? What'd you hear? What's interesting? What's boring? What don't you believe? What'd you just hear in that? No rocket science, right?
Well, so,
I just think that if you set aside that false pride that comes with that position,
Mhm.
and you realize that everybody that is there under the same umbrella, they're an integral part to it if you treat one another in such a way,
Yeah.
that reciprocation will go so far.
It does. It does. Right?
It just seems so simple. I don't understand why it's not practiced.
Human beings. I mean, we're just not, we're wired for self. We're so wired, and then we all need so much friggin' dog food all the time, for our little egos. We're always seeking, and that's not leading. I mean, this whole idea of values-based leadership it's that servant, it's authentic, right? That's the DNA of the day, by the way. Yes, sir.
Mark, I can relate to a lot of what you're saying as a former bouncer.
Okay.
But no, seriously though, I've seen leadership, whether it's through leaders I've related to as being a follower, or whether it's leading in my own capacity, that it really comes down to setting vision so that there's a target. This is what we're doing, setting those values about who we are.
Yep.
But the challenge is that I can, it's easy to write the documents
It is very easy.
and to send them around.
Yeah.
The difficult part is the consistency
Yes, it
of
is.
day by day living the example and demonstrating through one's own actions. No, this really is who I am, and this is who we expect everyone to be.
You got it. And policing yourself first, and then your organization second, right? And then we've since we started this journey, we're not that big, we've lost 10 officers, 2 this year. Okay, and we believe all human beings are extraordinary, so these are extraordinary people, but our values aren't just words on the wall. And the second one that went was a really, really good friend of mine, and I was tweeting, posting that day, and I just remember posting, this contrary to popular belief, values-based companies are insanely fierce, especially when they're more than just words on the wall. Because you know what? Values-based cultures, when you put them on the wall, you have now identified yourself as a behavior-based company. There's a certain behavior, thinking, emotion, action, that's our car, that's our credo. Even you perfectionists in the room, we're messy creatures. Okay, so the extent to which we're going to walk that walk every day isn't real high. And the minute someone's not walking the walk, you got to go, come here. Because the minute you don't and everyone's watching, they go, oh, they're just words on the wall. So feedback, fierce conversations, we are training on that all the time. Yes, ma'am.
Hey.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Following up on that, so how do you deal with, there are some people that for whatever reason, they don't want to do this. They feel unjustly put upon or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What if this is one of those untouchable people? Because sometimes you can, I guess one solution is you're saying you say it doesn't work, it's not working. What if you try and you're doing all these things and there you find someone who just is not going to embrace these values? There's one option, which is let him go, but sometimes that's not an option.
Wow. Family member and a family-owned business. I'm going, when could that be an option?
Just say you worked for the state. Just say.
Danielle, here we go again. We were just in this.
Oh, sorry, I came in late. Did you do this?
No.
Another talk.
Yeah, we had 400 people in the room trying to explain to me the structure of state stuff, and I'm like, oh my God. So, the closest we get, so let's talk about publicly traded companies. What we try to do and what we believe is that, the secret sauce, Tom talked about, making sure you have the right people on the right seat on the right bus. Well, first you got to know what the bus is. You've got to really, really work hard and think about what's your mission, what's your vision, what's your values, what are your beliefs, what type of leader do you want. And in any time I hear that, I go, you know what? If you can get the organization to write that DNA and commit to it, it's kind of hard to go, yeah, but. Now, I know you're in situations, how much feedback are you given? Is there a coach involved? There's got to be a way. There doesn't got to be. That's not true. You have to make sure and exhaust all resources where you get that person looking in that mirror. Because we're, human beings, we still want to do okay at some point. But if they're not getting good feedback, they're getting a raise every year. If, I don't know. I wouldn't even know what to do with that. Because, we work in a company where you escort, except your last name's Luck, and then they go anywhere. I tried that, by the way. Yeah.
We talk more about money because it makes sense to me what you're saying, that you can move people more with good leadership than with giving them a 30% raise.
Yep.
And
Well,
I took
that
a pay
hurt.
cut to leave a boss who sucks, so I understand that.
Okay.
There's a lot more than money, but even if my boss is the best dude in the world, I'm not gonna stay if they're not gonna. You can't. There's got how can you incorporate the money incentives, whether it's raises or bonuses or stock options, into values-based leadership and make this is all, a lot of this is very qualitative or interpersonal stuff. How do you work to evaluate that so you pay your people who are the best values-based leaders more money to show that this is that's not the only reward, but this is a reward.
Yeah. And what's your name, bud?
Jacob.
Jacob. I don't maybe we can do this again. No, Jacob, that we have a really, really innovative and rich set of processes, models, tools, programs, rituals that this ideology rides on. It is how it's this school. We don't just recruit at any school, right? We don't just hire any person. You have to take an assessment coming in. You're onboarding. Everything is clearly set up around our credo, our mission, vision, values, strategy. So we make it really clear. You get paid for it, you get bonus for it. I get 360s every year done on me by lots of people, right? And they work, by the way, and because I'm when you're a recovering jerk, you'll always be a jerk. You just want to be a little less one. So every year on my 360, if the question has in it something about compassion, caring, empathy, I don't do well. So you see, right? But you get paid. So first of all, there is processes. Secondly, you have to have contracts with your associates. It's no different than with customers, right? You really got to say, this is what we stand for. Is this right for you? People don't come to our company to get rich. Go to Wall Street. And we tell you, this is the percent of the market we're going to pay you. And here's the band that you're going to work in, and here's the bonuses you can get, and this is how you can get it. And then, this is where it gets fierce again. If someone's pounding me to death on money, I'm going to go right back to that very specific data and go, look, this is what we talked about. Now, you want to talk about more? How do we get you to this next band? And then we're getting clear and clear on what that takes. So it can't just be this random. I don't mean to say money doesn't matter, because there's good old Maslow who does say you got to eat, you got to be warm, you got to have a roof. And I also believe everybody's version of survival is different. So you got to know your associates really well to know, first off, what are their basic needs? Because I can promise you it's different for Charlie Luck than me, right? What are those basic needs? And then if you're really, 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 if you really, really care about them, you're constantly in this conversation about, is this working for you? Are you doing the right thing? Is there anything else? We talk about that all the time, right? I mean, we've got 2 brand new ones and I'm wearing them out. What do you want to do? You're no good at that. Give me something else. How much money do you want to make? What do you want to do with your career? Our partners, so it's an ongoing conversation, but it's also very clear what you can make in your company. You got to be honest. We don't talk about pay enough. Yeah.
You just mentioned, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go with your career? And I've heard a couple of things, one of them being Generation Y is all about me all the time. You mentioned we want our trophy. You've said that 2-3 times
Yeah,
already.
I don't have kids, so that's only what I read, partner.
Fair enough. I love trophies. So. But we hear this a lot, and then we've been coming off of the norm has been you get a career and you're there for however many years and then you retire from this company. And now we've gotten into, I want to create value every place I am, and I'm only going to be at a place for a year, 2 years, 3 years. Have you seen that companies as leaders are now saying, I am just a holding tank for you.
Awesome.
I got you for 2 years.
Awesome.
How can I get you to the next place? And if you create value that way, are you really creating the culture that says, not only am I here, am I creating value for this company, I'm going to be set when I go to the next spot because they helped me get there.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I mean, we really are studying Gen Y like crazy, because whether you whether you like it or not, it's coming. And that's part of the DNA. Now remember, everything's a bell curve, right? So you got I'm going to be there for 2 years or less for every job I have. You got the ones in the middle. We plan in 50-year cycles, right? So we're a little bit we have a long tail in our company. So we'll have a tendency to try to find someone that might want to hang out an extra year or two. We're going to talk to you about that, is my point. Again, we're going to have that conversation. No guarantees. But we just had that conversation the other day in our succession planning meeting, which we do at the executive level, right? People. And we're going, you know what, we've got people in a 10 to 15 year readiness program, and we're going, is there such a thing anymore? Is it, probably not. So we're thinking about it, right? Because the idea, remember, don't fight it. It's coming. How do you work with it? It's a great point.
You said something that just struck me very interesting.
Yeah.
We work in 50-year planning cycles.
Yeah.
Most for-profit companies don't do that.
Yeah, they do 3 months.
They're driven by the criticality of what's coming up next quarter.
Yeah.
And so the investment you make in a values-based culture can be shifted by the dynamics of that. And I've had the privilege of working in a values-based culture.
Okay.
They didn't do 50-year planning cycles, but it was a large corporation, but it was very values-driven. And then through merger, finding out I was now in a company that had an entirely different culture.
Yeah.
That it was all what's happening this quarter. And when we talk about, well, why don't managers get it?
Yeah.
It's because the rewards, the success, the motivators drive against that because you're focused on short-term return.
Right. So there's two. What's your name, partner?
Rush.
Rush?
Not that one, huh?
I like that one. Of course, these guys are like that. Kills me. Right? There's two conversations going on around that right now, which is really, really fascinating. First of all, I don't think Gen Y and all their consciousness is going to tolerate much this quarter-to-quarter thing. I really don't. I think they're going to literally buy stocks from companies that have a conscience. I hope. Maybe I should say that. In the meantime, okay, we're working on this consortium of public and private and having these conversations up in New York on, well, everything we know about a human being and how we behave and all the neuroscience that's going on right now makes all this VBL stuff make really, really good sense, right? There's one of the things, we might never even get to this, there is a presentation about this, but there's this known that all human beings have extraordinary potential, right? It's a known, it's a scientific fact. It's also known that it's largely untapped, okay? And so the reason there's more and more noise in Columbia and all these guys are plugging it in, all our model does is try to cultivate that potential in people, and it works. Okay, it works. Our, by the way, those numbers that are 22% globally, ours is 86%, right? And we perform really, really well financially, okay? 15 minutes to go. Holy Moses. So one of the things, there's a American Enterprise Institute up in DC. There's a lot of organizations that are actually starting to study family businesses, okay, to go, why do these things last so long? Why do they last generation to generation? And they're finding this threading of values that naturally happens father to son to grandson, mom, granddaughter on down. That's what keeps these things working. So they still got to make money, okay? But they're flipping CEOs every 3 to 6 years. This is how we're getting them interested in this subject. I mean, I've heard 3 years is average cycle for CEO up to 6 in the big boys. Well, what happens every time a new one comes in, a new set of values comes with them, and the organization goes like this. You lived it. Or an M&A happens, and the organization goes like this. And it's back to that thing about the state that we were talking about. Nardelli is at GE, right? And he's back there, big, neutron jack, running GE, and he was the leadership guru of his day, okay? And so everybody knew he was going to retire, and there were 3 guys, Nardelli, Imel, and McInerney, I think is his name, that were picked as his potential successor. Now, it's considered one of the best led companies in the world by the best leader in the world, so these 3 guys got to have big heat. They have to replace Jack. Imel gets it, right? And the other 2 have to leave. It's part of the contract. They can't stay because they're such powerful leaders. They say the 2 guys that don't get this got to leave the company. So they leave. Nardelli goes where? Home Depot. So you got to know he's one of the best leaders in the world. He goes to Home Depot. How'd he do?
Terrible.
Right? He just got named one of the 25 worst CEOs of the century. How's that for an honor? It's a trophy. Right? Well, you know what? The guy's a fantastic leader. Wrong bus. Wrong bus. Wrong DNA. So what is, IBM, Unilever, CAT, we're getting ready to go to Tokyo and Brussels and all to talk to CAT leaders about this right here. Right? To say, don't chase a moneymaker. Know the DNA, know the core values, know what this friggin' company stands for, and go find an exec whose personal DNA is the same. And then you're going to start winning that game. And they're starting to get interested in that.
Then you have to pass that DNA down.
Yes, sir.
I've seen so many examples in my company and the company my wife works for where they hire mid-tier managers and don't give them management capability.
Yeah.
And I think if you have the value at the top, it's just on the wall if you're not passing it to the bottom.
Yeah.
And I think that goes to putting the right people in the right place too. It's got to happen at every tier from top to bottom in order to flourish.
So to start it, you guys, step 1, what is it? What do you stand for? What difference do you want to make in the world? What are your values? Mission statement? What type of leader do you want? That's step 1. Don't say this is our leader. You don't know that yet. Right? You got to figure out who you want to be, and then you get a leader to match it. That's step 1. Someone had their hand up? Yes, sir.
I did have a quick question. Tom's point about management, because that is where the rubber meets the road. And I try to take my foot out of my mouth early because I'm a management person and learned a little bit about that at school in Raleigh, so very good. I think there is a pushback from, employees against middle management and ineffective managers that may be coming around that they might realize they want to work for ineffective managers. Do true leaders who are different than managers, in my opinion, are they starting to re-evaluate and value good management again?
Yeah. What's your name again?
Max.
Max?
Thank you, yes, sir.
My dog's name's Max.
Great name. Great name.
Harvard came, we're got our fingers crossed. We think that the Love Companies in Goochland is going to be in a Harvard article. It's an amazing experience, 2.5 years. And the reason they came was our front line. It wasn't us. We've been part of a bunch of research, and they're realizing they think that we may be one of the better companies out there that get this stuff pushed down to the front line. Right? So they come down, and we kept talking to them about our key influencers, and they kept saying, well, we're not interested in you guys. And we go, that's not us. It's our frontline managers. So however many levels down that is, the people that run the stores and the plants, first of all, they get the exact same training I do. And by the way, so do our loader operators, so do our haul truck drivers. We use insights. We think knowing each other's personalities are one of the keys to the kingdom. You want to do one thing to change your company, do a disc or an insights and be real open and honest about it, and all of a sudden you go, no wonder I couldn't stand you for 20 years. You're my opposite. That's me and Charlie's, by the way. So I do think it's coming back. I do think because of this recognition of boss associate, that's where that straight and beautiful really comes in. I think it's so important. And then what happens in our organization, you can go up to our Fairfax, Leesburg quarries. These are big, giant quarries with big, giant dudes that come out of West Virginia, and, right? Sleeves cut off, arms bigger than my head. And they all wear, they have to wear hard hats. And on their hard hats, you'll see 2 color dots. And this wasn't mandated. It's their insights colors. Because those guys know, he's a big red. He's going to be a little bit of a jerk. Or, and they talk to each other that way at our front line. So you can't just stop at the manager. You got to go all the way down with your story, go all the way down with your alignment, and engage them in the exact same stuff. And that's what we do. Yeah, bud.
I'm coming from more of a peer-to-peer kind of organizational structure, but when you want to enable people to move from being effective in your organization to being more engaged. Because right now, Gen Y, we're being taught leadership is everything. You should be a leader. You should always be a leader. But when you have leaders moving in different directions, opposing your core values and opposing each other, how do you make them effective and kind of going in the same direction?
Okay, so what's your name?
Elliot.
Elliot, one of the things that's really hard to change about ourselves is our values. Okay, you can change them, but it's really, really hard. And they're usually wired, hardwired by the time we're like 8 years old. All right, so if you've got what we know now today, we're really clear on what our values are, what behaviors we want, the difference we want to make in the world. When we have an associate that's wobbly, okay, first of all, remember, we said all human beings are extraordinary, so we can't go, what a jerk, what an idiot. I shouldn't do that to Richard. We can't do that because we've already said they're extraordinary. What we know, wrong bus, wrong dance floor. Okay? So the nice thing about clearly articulating what your values are, and not just honesty, what does that mean? What does that behavior look like? Integrity, what does that mean? Be really specific. Then you've got that on the wall. Then if everybody wants to stay, they got to walk that walk. And you know what? If they don't value it, they won't be able to. You'll see them, they'll be crunchy, they won't be happy, and it's only because they're out of alignment with what you said. Values-based companies, when they get really, really good, they don't have opposing leaders. Or they don't mean that. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
2 guys acting or 2 girls acting entirely different, your actions and behaviors come from your values. It just means they value different things. You're going to have a hell of a time, getting them to come together if there's that much difference.
When you have people kind of embody that quality leadership and have set values, like how do you get them to take their own initiative? Like how do you have people surprise you, come to you with new things, new ideas that you hadn't even thought of yourself?
You have to set that up as a value. Right? So you want to value that. You want to value innovation. You want to value creativity. You want to value curiosity, and then you check them as there's going to be certain. You and I could sit down. I'd go ask them these 4 questions, and you'll find out whether they value that stuff or not. And if they don't, it's going to come out. But you can't get high innovation, high out of someone who's low risk, and those are people too, right? So again, it's right back to that. Make sense? Put it in your value set. Got it?
Got it.
Cool.
And then hire somebody that's matched to it.
Yeah.
Happiness is an inside job. Motivation is an inside job.
Oh yeah.
And I think, and I have a theory that part of the reason why the unemployment rate has been so slow to come back is because of the statistics that you gave up front. There was only 60 to 70% of the workforce doing most of the work. Everybody else was there collecting a paycheck. So employers have not been highly motivated to bring that other part of the workforce back on.
Yeah, I think you're
They're
exactly
getting the
right.
work done without it.
Yeah, you lift any company's hood, ours included, we're going, well, we don't need to hire, right? We don't need to do it.
So you got to find the motivated person that matches the values of the company to be on the right bus.
So we got, let me just throw a little disclaimer and then I'll grab you. We're supposed to be done in like 5 minutes?
Yes.
We haven't talked about our answer to this. Do y'all want to do this again? Is there a way to get together so that we can at least show you how we respond to this whole thing? And we'll do it. I mean, if y'all are willing, because I'd really love, and this, by the way, I just want to put one slide up. Our version of it, it's not the answer, it's a answer. But what you'll get out of it is the intention of how we're going about getting after this dialogue right here. So maybe we'll figure out a way to grab some pizza and beer and do this again, right? Because we're definitely not going to get to this. And I would rather answer your questions. I mean, I'd love to do the dog and pony show. But remember, leadership's about meeting people where they are. Y'all had questions. I'd rather answer your questions. Yeah, partner.
It's okay, go ahead.
No, I'm not going to go
okay.
there. You go.
Yeah, I was just going to make the point there, Mark. I don't know your thoughts about this, but that point about establishing the values, this is the stuff that doesn't change. This is who we are. It's on the wall, but we're also walking it.
Yeah.
It's to me, it's an important point to distinguish between the personality profiles, the red and the green and all that, because if the values are right, it's not really going to matter how we're relating to each other, because we all stand for the same thing.
Yeah. Real important point. Deep on the inside is this value set. It's these deeply held beliefs about what you feel are right and good. And you want to live, when you hear about living in alignment, a life well lived, authentic people, it means they're living their values. And I can promise you they're happier, they're more straight and beautiful every day, right? They've got a lot of energy, positive, not all the time. Remember, this is life, right? But you will see that in the person. The next outer ring is your persona. It's your personality, right? Red, yellow, blue, green, Myers-Briggs, DISC, insights, okay? And all that personality is, it's how you present your values to the world. So you can have two people that value the exact same thing, but it'll look very different when they present it to the world. So you need to know both. The reason the personality profiles are so important, that's what the world sees. They don't see your values, they see you behave. So you want to scrub that up as much as you can, right? But it also makes you, I remember I used to, God, well, they never talk, they're such jerks. Well, they're introverted blues, they're cautious thinkers. They're not going to talk unless you cut their brain out and put a new one in. They're not. Stop picking on them. And it is fantastic when you start understanding. And so it's a great point, partner. That is different than what you value. And then it's also different than your purpose, right? Viktor Frankl, we're all on this earth for a reason, and we are, right? And that mission for each of us, whatever it is, you need to fulfill that, right? That's your purpose. That's the difference you want to make. I'm doing mine right now, right? And when you get to live your purpose, and you get to wake up every day and behave in alignment with your core values, you're going to make hay. You're going to do good. We're going to have to wrap up in a minute. Yeah, you want to... And then I'll come up to you. Go ahead,
I have a couple companies that came to mind when talking about this stuff, clients of mine, and one particular stands out, that through the 2008 downturn, before 2008, they had a fantastic culture, great relationships with the employees, and employees loved their bosses.
Okay.
Through 2008, the business took a major dive. The bosses have done everything they can to keep the business going. They haven't had to let anybody go. They've continued paychecks. They've even had to cover paychecks out of personal assets to make it happen. But they did have to cut a few benefits and scale down on the Christmas party. And there seemed to be a big contentment that started to brew between the employees and the employer. The employer feeling unappreciated because they're paying the employees out of their personal assets to keep the business afloat, and not telling them that, of course. And then the employees feeling that, hey, you got these rich bosses.
Driving their big cars.
Driving big cars, and they're cutting our retirement benefits.
Yeah.
How do they convey that to them that they are fulfilling the value statement that they had on the wall? They're fulfilling the same values that they had in 2007, with also not freaking them out that they might be out of a job in the next 6 months because those assets are starting to dry up.
So you go all the way back to the beginning, and before you cut anything, you sit down with them and you go, let's talk about this.
Transparency.
Right, big transparency, big we got to lose some money. How do you all want to do it? We can take away vacation. We had this conversation. We can take away your vacation, right? We can all take a pay cut. We can. So again, it's right back to sitting down, having a conversation with your folks, then making the decision, which is how we did it. Then Charlie did a humongously, it was a really emotional time for us because we've done it before. He does a video that we showed 2 weeks before 150 had to go out, and he explained to all the associates, we talked to you, this is, we've done all we could, so we've been fighting this thing already for a year and a half, and now we have to do this. And then he gave the associates 2 weeks to get their heads around it, and then you did it. So there's just ways. It's never going to be perfect, but if you're close to them, you'll know that contentment's going on, and you got to get right back in there. What we'll do is go, ooh, they're upset, I'm going away. You got to run to the fire, man. And you got to be close enough to them, because you know what, if you got a great relationship, they'll go, I don't like this. Let's talk about that. Right? So it's back to that DNA of, right, living with them. Get right. So let's wrap with this. Being a VBL organization, there's a couple quick steps to it. The first, you've heard this theme of who are you? What is your mission? What difference do you want to make in the world? What is your vision? What do you get up and do every day to make that difference? Right? What are your values? Right? All that, you filter everything through your values and define them and define the behaviors really succinctly. Okay? What is your leadership point of view? What type of leader do you need to deliver on that mission, vision, and values? Because not every leader is right for every company. What are the characteristics of that leader? Be really clear about that. And then what culture? What are your cultural characteristics? And all those things work in sync to deliver your mission and your business unit strategy. And then step 2, you go right at the leaders and you go, now we're going to plug you up. And we're going to see, Jeff, how does your personality, how do your values, how does everything you believe line up with what we just defined? And then it doesn't mean you're out. We get really clear on the gap, Jeff, and the chief leadership officer rolls in and goes, let's get busy. Because we got to close this gap because it's sending the wrong message to the associates. And there you go. Did this work? Get a little something out of it? I'm sorry we didn't get to the deck.